Welcome to my world history notes, where I read from the book that I wrote to teach homeschoolers world history. A Bible believer looks at world history. You can find it on lulu.com, amazon.com, at the Bible Baptist bookstore, or just follow me here. It's from the perspective of a Bible believer. You might not agree with what I say, you might even be offended by what I say. But the important thing is that you have an opinion about world history because you've studied it. And that's what I'm hoping, whether the opinion is different from mine or not. So, in any event, let's begin. We're talking about science in the early 1800s. We're up to that point. So, um, in science, the direct application of the scientific method to solving man's problems and answering his questions began to be interlaced with speculation designed to overthrow his religious beliefs and a method of interpreting evidence so that any mention of the supernatural or God is thrown out as being superstitious and ignorant, thereby excluding the theoretical scientist from many avenues of understanding and inquiry. Theology, the study of God's revelation to man, once called the queen of sciences, becomes marginalized today, or marginalized slowly by naturalistic philosophers who, in order to justify their own sin and lost estate, relegate mankind to a mere brute aggregate of atoms accountable to no higher authority than the state or himself. This archaic and pagan way of looking at existence has its roots in the Renaissance and in ancient Greek philosophy, gleaned from the many cultures that preceded it, and heavily borrowed from a perverted view of the Hebrew scriptures, which I've shown previously that they were well acquainted with. And this view of the world and of this idea of God begins to affect the most scholarly segments of the religious world. In 1799, a French soldier in Napoleon's army invading Egypt discovered a black stone near the town of Rosetta. The inscription on the Rosetta Stone is found to date to 197 BC and is written in three languages, Greek and two forms of hieroglyphics. Using this stone in 1822, scholars such as Jean-Francois Champollion began reading excuse me, ancient text based on the assumption that this one stone is the authority they could trust and that hieroglyphics hadn't changed their meaning between 2000 BC and 197 BC. In 1839, John Lloyd Stephens and Frederick Catherwood began their expedition that will uncover Mayan ruins in Central America. In the 1840s, excuse me, sorry about that, British archaeologist Sir Austin Henry Layard begins to excavate the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal's palace, or excuse me, his library at Nineveh in Iraq. In 1846, Henry Queswick Rawlinson begins to decipher Mesopotamian cuneiform that had been carved into a cliff in Persia during the reign of Darius the Great, copying ignored work already done by German George Grotefend in 1802. In the same year in America, the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio is excavated by F. George Squire and Edward H. Davis. Around 1800, the Cooper fossil beds in Germany, that's Keuper, are described, linking them to a period of remote prehistory called the Late Triassic period by students of science. In the Connecticut Valley, Pliny Moody finds fossil prints that are claimed to belong to dinosaurs of the same imaginary period, and later Solomon Ellsworth Jr. and Nathan Smith would work in that area. In 1811, British paleontologist Mary Anning discovers the first complete skeleton of what is called an ichthyosaur. French anatomist Baron Cuvier discovers a fossil of what is to be called a pterodactyl, thought to be a flying dinosaur, although some scientists today insist that it was just a large bird, complete with feathers, and all the fantastic drawings showing the flying dino are just that, fantasy. He also publishes Inquiry into Fossil Remains, the first major work on paleontology. He invented the view called catastrophism, that fossils do not represent ancestors of modern animals, but separate creations that ended in extinction as the result of great cataclysms. In 1821, Gabriel de Mortellet, who will begin using the term Paleolithic or Old Stone Age, is born. The term dinosaur isn't introduced till 1841. True science, as opposed to the junk science, or as the Bible puts it, science falsely so called, mentioned above, also makes a great headway during this period. Technology, medicine, and chemistry leap forward, with William Nicholson constructing an electric battery in 1800. Johann Ritter invents electroplating at about the same time. Humphrey Davy discovers nitrous oxide or laughing gas, which will become the first anesthetic. Robert Fulton, who will gain fame as the inventor of the first successful steamship, is the first to use metal to build a submarine at that time. Dr. Hedinus of Germany performs the first removal of a thyroid gland to treat goiters. The advancement of science in this period, in contrast to the parallel quote, advancement of speculation clothed in scientific terms would be a great independent study. One of the most important scientific personages of this time was a man named Charles Darwin, grandson of Erasmus Darwin, Unitarian, a group that denies Christ's divinity, and proponent of evolution who foreshadowed the work of Lamarck. Charles Darwin, not his grandfather Erasmus, served as a naturalist aboard the HMS Beagle from 1831 to 1836 in a British scientific expedition that traveled around the world. His encounter with life on the Galapagos Islands off the coast of South America in the Pacific Ocean served as the basis for his own theory of evolution and his profound and harmful influence on a world ready to accept any theory, no matter how unprovable, unscientific, or preposterous, to justify its rejection of the Bible. People bound for hell will grab at any rationale to justify the journey. In 1800, Italian Alessandro Volta invented the electric battery. In 1801, Joseph Marie Jacquard invents the Jacquard Loom, using punch cards to guide needle motions to produce patterned textiles. Later, in 1834, Charles Babbage will realize that punch cards can control calculator processes. This will eventually lead the way to the computer. U.S. farmer Thomas More invents the first icebox, the progenitor of the refrigerator, in 1802, while the first vacuum-packed foods are packaged by Nicholas Appert in his factory in France. In 1804, the first steam locomotive to operate on a railroad, constructed by British inventor Richard Trevithick, travels nearly 10 miles and achieves speeds of almost 5 miles per hour. Okay, we're going to stop there and we're going to pick it up with Anglican and Roman Catholic Christianity in the first half of the 19th century. Some world-changing events from a spiritual point of view take place. This will take, maybe we can do this in one or maybe two, and then we'll wrap up some summations and questions about the last few sessions we've been talking about. I hope you'll study world history, and I thank you for listening to me and watching. And I hope you get something out of it. And even if it's disagreeing with me, you dig, study, research. Thank you.